Read Smart, the Baillie Gifford Prize podcast. This podcast is generously sponsored by the Blavatnik Family Foundation.
Hello and welcome everyone to Read Smart, the official podcast of the Baillie Gifford Prize for Non-Fiction. Today you join us as we meet each of the shortlisted authors for the 2025 award in the lead up to the announcement of this year's winner on the 4th of November 2025. As always, our heartfelt thanks go to the Blavatnik Family Foundation for generously supporting this podcast. Today, I'm thrilled to be joined by one of Australia's most acclaimed and admired writers whose collected diaries, How to End a Story, is on this year's shortlist. Helen Garner is a storied writer, the winner of the 2006 inaugural Melbourne Prize for Literature, the 2016 Wyndham Campbell Literature Prize for Non-Fiction, the 2019 Australia Council Award for Lifetime Achievement in Literature, and the 2023 Australian Society of Authors Medal. Her novels and works of non-fiction include This House of Grief, Monkey Grip, and The Children's Bach. In this volume, Helen collects together for the first time in one book 20 years of diaries from the 70s to the 90s, describing in intimate and indelible real-time detail her passions and doubts, her experience of motherhood, of writing, of friendship, of love, and of the disintegration of her marriage. Helen, thank you so much for joining us and congratulations on being a finalist for this year's award.
Thank you so much. It's lovely to be here.
I'm going to begin with a question I suspect you've been asked many times before. Why is the book called How to End a Story?
Well, it started off, it came out in 3 volumes, as you probably know, and they had other titles. And the third book is an account of the breakup of a marriage. And it's, I don't know, the phrase just kind of popped into my head from nowhere. It's very hard to find a title for a diary because you can't really say, well, what is this about? You know, what's the story? What is this? So I think actually the phrase "how to end a letter" was floating around, and we were talking. My publisher Michael Hayward, we're talking about this, the way people sign off letters, which is something I'm always interested, especially in historical books. And I said, oh, maybe we could call the book How to End a Letter. And he said, no, let's call it How to End a Story. So I think that's how it happened, in a series of little spontaneous grabs at whatever was moving past.
Well, it's a great relief that your story goes on at least almost another 30 years at least since the end of the book, which is good. So it's not the full
I know that's impossible to grasp.
When did you decide to start? I know this is a 1-volume collection of previously published, but presumably, did you edit what had gone before into a single volume to make it fit together, or did you just run them all together?
No, we just went 3 volumes together, yeah. But of course I did edit them before I published each one.
Well, indeed. What made you decide to start publishing your diaries? When did you make that decision?
Well, I had published chunks of more contemporary diaries in a magazine here called The Monthly, which I often wrote for, and I'd sort of present them as a sort of a couple of 1,000-word chunk, and people seemed to like them and wanted more, and so Michael Hayward, my publisher, said, "Why don't you go back and publish from some point in the distant past, and we'll make a book of it." And first of all, I thought, oh, what a terrible idea. But then I went and got the older ones, the ones back in the 70s, because I had burnt a lot of diaries over the years. I mean,
okay.
I had a major conflagration at a certain point, and that was kind of thrilling to burn them. I burnt them up to the point where this book starts, where this collected book starts. And I stopped burning around about the time that they stopped being boring, because there was a lot of the older ones were very, oh, why doesn't he love me? That sort of gushy girl stuff. And I thought, gee, this is such a bore. And then I got to the part where I actually lived in Paris for a couple of years. My daughter and I went there. And suddenly the diary became more interesting, so I stopped burning. And that's where the current book starts, and it
I'm
goes through.
fascinated in the bonfire of the diaries. Does the decision to burn the earlier ones mean that you always knew you were going to publish them at some point, and that you burned the early ones because they weren't
No, I
publishable quality?
never think how I was going to publish them. You see, when my first novel, which was called Monkey Grip, that was largely based on diaries. And, you know, I got the rounds of the kitchen for that in Australia. Go, oh, she's only published her diaries. And I thought my blood was up after that, because I thought people were snobby, or men at that point were very snobby about diaries, and thought that they were, firstly, that they were sort of unbearably girly and emotional, and that there was no craft to it, that it was just a gush of moaning and whinging, basically. And I thought, I looked at them and I thought, no, there's some good stuff in here. And when I got to the point where I thought I could see good stuff, that's when I started pulling it together and thinking what I could do with it. But no, I never really knew. I never had a publishing purpose in mind for the diaries, and actually that's why I like them. Because even today, even after I've published that lot, and I still keep a diary now, I'm not writing for anybody else. This is writing just purely for pleasure and enjoyment, and for expression to myself. And it's also, basically, I look back and I see that's how I taught myself to write. It was daily practice. I would practice, still do, an hour, perhaps 2 a day. And it's just pure pleasure. Just pushing the pen, a fountain pen, across the page. It gives me intense pleasure. And if you're not writing for, nobody's sort of drumming their fingers waiting for you to bring it in to publish it, you're free in a way that you aren't in other sorts of writing. So there's no one breathing down your neck. That's what I'm saying.
One of those ghastly agents and publishers banging on your door.
Yeah, them.
And so diary keeping has been integral to your life as a writer for a long time then. Did you keep a diary as a child? I mean, were you a teenage diary
I
keeper?
don't remember when I started. I come from a big family. I'm the oldest of 6 kids, and I was always trying to get away from all the others and into a quiet place. And I used to sort of go out in a back shed and have a little notebook out there, but I don't think I ever wrote anything in it. I just liked there to be one there. But, yeah, and I have, you see, the thing about diary is that it uses daily life as its subject matter.
Yeah.
And domestic things. And those were also in Australia considered rather beneath contempt for some time. You know, I was always told that my work was too domestic and it was small canvas, is the expression people use. Yeah. But that doesn't seem to be a problem anymore.
There's the version of your work where you're sitting writing for yourself in the spirit of disinhibition. And then there's the decision to start publishing them, which is essentially a decision to invade your privacy and your own privacy and the privacy of other people's as well. How do you navigate this sort of moral, ethical landscape between public and private? I was reading about that line of Nadine Gordimer's that you have to write as if you're dead. Do you take that on board as an idea?
Yeah, she's terrific. She was terrific on all that sort of stuff. Well, one thing I discovered, especially after I'd published the first volume, people's responses to it really surprised me, and I was terribly happy about it, that people would say to me that they felt that they met themselves in the diaries. And that made me realise that if you're digging down into yourself, you're not just digging further and further into an abyss of loneliness, but you're digging you get down to a level where everyone else is, where you feel intense companionship with other people and a comradely feeling and sort of boundaryless empathy with other people. And I was amazed, particularly after the 3rd volume came out, the one that this one's named after, How to End a Story. How many women have said to me, whispering as if it was a secret, this could be my marriage. And that deeply shocked me, because I thought, what? And you're still in it? I mean, it was just the what it made me understand was it wasn't just me battling my way out of that painful marriage, but it taught me a lot about marriage itself and how extremely difficult it is and can be, and especially when you've got two creative people married to each other.
Yeah.
And it's a great battle in many ways, and I think people feel ashamed of themselves often when their marriages fail. You feel that you haven't measured up to some standard that you had imposed or that society had imposed.
Mm.
But to find that other people go through those really quite agonising experiences, it's been a wonderful thing to me to feel that comradeliness with other people.
And when you were going back and re-editing them before publication, how hard was it to decide, or what decisions did you make rather to protect the innocent and indeed the guilty?
Well, firstly, I gave everyone an initial. When I first started out, I'm just suddenly remembering this, I've forgotten it. When I started out, I thought, well, how am I going to identify people so that you can read it as a narrative? And I thought I'd been in my reading group. I'm in a reading group that reads, mighty works of literature, and we'd just read the Iliad. And I was thinking maybe I could give each person a Homeric epithet. The one with the curly hair, or the one who was really good at playing the piano. And I realised in about 10 minutes this wasn't going to work. but it was sort of fun to think about. And I should say that there were many people who appear in the diary over the years, and if they were people I loved and didn't want to hurt or didn't want to reveal, whose lives I didn't want to reveal in an unwanted way, I wrote to them. I got in touch with quite a lot of people. I said, listen, I'm thinking of publishing my diaries and you appear in them, and I'm telling you this now because if you don't want to be in them, I won't put you in there. And many people just replied. Nobody said, how dare you, don't you dare. Not a single person said that to me, because by the time I get to the last one, all bets were off. That's a whole different story. But people wrote back and said, go right ahead, I trust you.
Yeah.
And that was a wonderful thing. Because, I don't... When I look back at the diaries, I was surprised to find how unbitchy they were. They weren't bitchy. They seem to me to be, they say things about people that, I have taken care not to do sloppy side swipes about people, to make smart-ass comments that would wound people who were just sort of innocently sitting at a table with me. But, there's a bit of an art to it.
Yeah, I'm sure. Well, to avoiding pettiness for a start, by the sounds of things.
Yes. Yeah, well, I didn't want to snipe at people. I wanted to talk about things that were about serious things and things that cause pain, but were in fact fruitful of understanding and depth of relationships. Just stuff about my parents. People die.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And as you went back 50 years into your own past, I mean, you said that you were pleased about your sort of generosity of spirit, although having met you, I don't find that surprising at all. But what were the other shocking and surprising things you found when you went back to spy on yourself 50 years on?
Oh, how stupid I was. The stupid mistakes that I'd made. Mistakes, foolish things that I'd done out of vanity or unconstrained fantasy. Trampling over people roughshod. Hurting people who loved me.
Mm.
I wasn't surprised by the actual incidents, but because I remembered them vividly and painfully sometimes. But I do think that I found myself to be a serious person, and so that was if I hadn't, if I'd found out that the diaries were sort of smart-ass, I hope I would have been too ashamed to publish them.
So the precondition for publishing them was that you basically were still quite fond of your younger self then?
Yeah, except might be overstating it slightly.
And you mentioned earlier about the way that readers have responded to the work. I mean, I suspect you might not have been this teleological, but what did you hope readers would take away from reading the book? I mean, you published one volume, but you published them in separate volumes before. This whole experience, what did you hope that readers would find in them?
Well, I hope they find, well, this might sound a bit too hopeful, but a fellow soul.
A sense of another person in all their personhood.
Yeah, and yes, I suppose when I write non-fiction, for example, if I'm writing about a trial, if I'm in court for months at a time, when I first started to do that kind of work, I thought I should write it in third person. I thought that I don't know why I thought I should. It's as if there was some kind of unspoken law that said that's how you wrote that kind of thing. And I would try to write it in third person, and I just couldn't get it off the ground. I found it was ponderous and heavy and boring.
Mm-hmm.
And then so as soon as I switched into first person, everything became sort of lighter and more flexible. And I realised that one thing I wanted the reader to come right into the story with me. I didn't want to back off and do a sort of God's eye view of a murder trial, for example. I wanted to be able to get into my text all the changes that I went through about, was the person guilty? What the sorts of strange contortion, emotional and psychological contortions you go through when you're watching something as drastic as a murder trial. And instead of backing off and saying, and I found that this was the case, I want the reader to be right there in the seat with me, looking at things, listening to people's tones of voice, and sensing that my constant changes of attitude towards what I'm observing. So I found that if I wrote in first person, I could just make the whole experience more intimate, and that's what I hoped for.
Yeah, well, very successfully. Do you read other diarists, and do you have a favourite?
No, not much. No, actually, I'm interested. People always ask me that, and I haven't even read all that many. Well, I've read Virginia Woolf's diaries, of course, because they're just monumental and marvellously enjoyable and fun to read. That's the other thing about diaries; they're often fun.
Yeah,
and fun. Like a lot of that's one thing that really annoys me about famous books, great books. People hardly ever tell you how funny they are. I mean, mighty works of literature, and you think, oh, this is really serious. I'm going to have to be earnest all the way through. But then you find yourself cracking up with laughter, and I'm saying, where is that on the cover of this book that this is going to make me crack up? And I think that's a terrible swindle. And I think it's a swindle on young people because if you approach literature as if it's a mountain that you have to drag yourself up with great groaning and despair, nobody wants to feel those things. Yeah. So, but if people thought that, if Kafka was going to make them laugh out loud, they'd be reading it and they wouldn't sort of chicken out.
So it should say on the front of the trial, this book is really pretty funny, full stop, honestly.
Lots of there's a lot of other stuff as well, but no, I'm exaggerating. But yeah, I do like laughing. And there are laughs to be had about sad things.
Of course. That was wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us, Helen, and very, very best of luck in the last round of the book prize.
Thanks so much. It's been lovely to meet you. And I'm so flabbergasted that this has happened to me. I can't believe it. Even if it never goes any further, I'll always treasure it. Thank you.
Thank you. And we'd like also to thank the Blavatnik Family Foundation for its continued and generous support of this podcast. The winner will be announced on the 4th of November, as I said at the top of the programme, an awards ceremony also supported generously by the Blavatnik Family Foundation. The announcement will be live streamed across the Baillie Gifford Prize for Non-Fiction social channels. If you're interested in finding out more about the shortlisted books or following the progress in the prize more generally, you can visit our website or follow us on X or Facebook, Instagram or TikTok at BG Prize. Thank you for listening. Until next time.
Read Smart, the Baillie Gifford Prize podcast. This podcast is generously sponsored by the Blavatnik Family Foundation.